All right, today starts part 2 of the 85 C10 Squarebody LS swap. All right, so we're going to start today with, I want to get the bottom side all handled. I didn't have the right motor mount through bolts for the clamshells, so I picked them up. Now, one thing we're fighting is the rear transmission mount is not where I want it to be on the cross member. We had chose to use, I can't see that, chose to use that hole. And you can see there's one more hole forward, which would shove the engine back just an inch. We have enough clearance everywhere to get that inch. So we're going to do that so we can use a factory transmission mount on our 400 without any modifications. Let's see over here. There is plenty of room back in here. This should not be a problem whatsoever. So what I need to do is get this lifted up, and we're going to lift the engine up, move them clamshells forward 1 inch, shove the engine transmission back, and that should make the transmission crossmember sit right where it should be from the factory. So the goal today is to have the engine and transmission sitting where we want it, and have everything on the other side handled, the drive shaft back in, which we're back in the same location where it was, shouldn't be a problem. Drive shaft, shifter linkage, the electric wire for the kickdown, it is a turbo 400, so it uses that switch on the pedal for the kickdown. I'm going to get the starter back in, transmission line started, and that means we have to address some of the wiring. I know this is the nemesis for a lot of guys, but I'm going to go through this. I've never done this before, but I'm going to tell you, from what I see, what I've read, this is nothing. This is a cakewalk. So we'll go through and I'll show you exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to look and see if I have another fuse box that's smaller, because we don't need all that. I think we need like 4 or 5 fuses and a couple relays. That's it. So we may not need all that crap. So I'm going to look and see if I have something else that'll work. If not, that's what we're using. So without further ado, we get this thing jacked up. We'll get it on stands. Let's get this motor moved back where it needs to go. I need to lift that motor like I said, so let's get at it. All right, I ended up moving the clamshells forward to the very front hole. If I was using the other transmission, maybe one that was a little bit longer, is that right? It would push this forward, but the transmission I'm using is turbo 400. I want to use the factory mount back there, so I move this thing forward, brings the engine back 1 more inch. I'm not upset about that at all. So I was able to use the factory transmission mount, the factory crossmember, and the factory location. So now, I did have to relieve the bottom of the clamshell because there is a spot, you won't be able to see it. One of the factory forged and machined places with the AC mounted, one of those bolt spots is in the way of the clamshell, so I had to relieve around the clamshell to make it fit where I wanted it, but it wasn't a big deal. Alright, so this is the original manifold to the 2003 truck. All right, it is set up that, you know, it was casted that it could have had a port for the EGR valve. Well, that sticks way out there, and that hits the frame where the mount comes down that the engine mount bolts to. So that interferes, and the clock position of this tab right here interferes with the frame. This is cast steel. I could take and cut this out and patch it in with a piece of steel, cut this off, and turn it the way it would clock better for me, but it's a compromise. I'll spend hours doing this, or I'm going to see if I can just locate manifolds that will work, that hug the block a little more, because I'm kind of in a hurry. I don't want to skimp. I don't want things to be done crappy, but I need to get this done so I can get on to some other stuff. Alright, I've got the drive shaft in. Had to clean up the yoke a little bit. It was out in the weather, so I took some emery cloth and PB Blaster. It worked good, no problems. Transmission mounts in, and I've got, let me get some light here. I have got the transmission cooler lines in, and I took the original inspection cover. This is from the 400 when it was bolted to the old engine, and I didn't want to leave the flywheel exposed. So I just took this thing and I cut the roll off of it right here so it would fit, and then I had to space it just ever so slightly right here, I put a washer between the bell housing, that just to give me a little more room between the flywheel. And then I took these holes and I tapped them to quarter and did the same thing, space that down a quarter. If it does okay, we'll leave it, because it feels pretty solid. But if it doesn't, then we're gonna add, we'll just weld on a tab down here and let it go over here to this other mounting bolt, and we'll weld it down in here. I'm not certain yet. I got the starter in because crank sensor, I want to get the starter in, but the crank sensor is way back behind it. All right, so being the crank sensor is way back behind it, I need to start the wiring. So I'm gonna start doing the wiring. So I want to use the GM wiring from the 03 because it comes down here below it real nice, and that way I can keep it all in. I'll just take the signal wire for the starter solenoid, and I'll use the one coming from the truck and tie it in over by the ECM. But this is all good. Now I need to work on the transmission modulator and a few other things. You know, the vacuum for the transmission modulator, that is. And I need to get working on some wiring. I've got the shifter in the I know this is jumbled up, it's hard to see and all that kind of crap, but alright, so this shifter had that bushing in there and it was worn out. I went to Summit, you can get that little nylon bushing in there, it's like $1.99. So I got that in, and I've got the shifter back in place, so we're good to go here. The speedometer cable is hooked back up, so now the only thing I'm missing is this had U-bolts in it, and U-bolts look like they were partially stripped. So I've been looking to try and find the proper U-bolts, but apparently this isn't a U-bolt, it's a strap. I'm worried the threads are stripped, so I ordered a new strap setup. We're going to see that. If not, I'll probably have to replace that yoke. But let's get on the top side now while I'm waiting on that. Alright, so I'm removing the AC. So what I'm doing is just tracing it back through the wiring harness all the way back to the ECM. And then I'm cutting it right at the ECM. And then I'll take this apart when I'm ready, and everything I've got cut off, I'll pull out of the connector. So all we have to do now, since I've cut them, is to just pull them back out of the harness. And just make our way back, get them all untangled. You can come out this way wherever they're easiest, and just pull them out one by one, and they'll come out. I like to do it this way because then all the places where you had splices, where you had different things coming off in the loom, is still there. Every location is still there. You'll see that the tape where the loom joint is, like the wire comes along and then something spurs off, there's always tape there. So I find this is the easiest way, so the harness can be put back together and laid just like it did from the factory, if that's what you want. So then, hold that. So then you just keep coming one by one and just pull them out. Then when I'm ready to do the other end over there, I'll know which ones I don't need because they're already cut out. Alright, so past this point we have neutral safety switch and downstream O2 after the catalytic converter, which we're not going to be using, vehicle speed sensor, and the control wiring for the 4L60E. We know we don't need any of this stuff from here down, so we're just going to go ahead while we got this apart, and we're going to eliminate that. Same concept. We're just going to pull the loom off, isolate the wires, pull them through all the way back to the ECM, find them, clip them off, and then we'll do all of our de-pinning out of that later. I picked up this part number G9084 cast iron manifolds from Summit Racing. They are a ball and seat type fit, and it's just a 2 bolts instead of a 3 bolt. It comes with 2 little stubbies with bolts and lock washers, and if you're not using O2s, they send these block off plugs. They send new bolts but there was no lock washers on the bolts, so I went ahead and added those and installed the passenger side, which is one we're worried about. And man, look how much room you have now. These they hug the block real well, and I don't see any interference anywhere in that area. You can see it doesn't hit the motor mount. It is extremely close to starter. Let me get underneath there and show you. Alright, we're under here, and you can see the stub clears the bell housing easily, clears everything over here, so that's good. However, the starter is extremely close. I mean, we got a 1/4 inch here. It's got a little heat shield on it to help protect it, but sure gives you enough clearance up there. That will work. It's not ideal, but also keep in mind that, you know, this isn't a daily driver. You know, this will be driven occasionally. So then we'd be able to hopefully turn a quick angle on that pipe right there and bring it through this cavity right here and just run straight duals. Yeah, that's what we're kind of hoping for. So all right, got this side in, and I had to do a little relief. Let's see if we can show you right in here. It's real close to the bell housing. It's right in here. So I had to relief cut that, just grind it a little bit, but it didn't take much. It looks, it's hard to see, but it's cleared. All right, next I got to do the transmission modulator line. It needs to go from here way up to the top, so I'm going to get that bent next. The old one was bent up too bad, so we're just going to make a new one. All right, working on my vacuum line for my transmission modulator. I have it coming up the back of the head here. I got a clamp to the head, and then I change over. It's still steel, but I put it in loom because I don't want it rubbing anything. And I came up to the intake. There was a port here that was blocked off. I opened it up and run our vacuum into here, so that takes care of that. Now I'm going to work on this purge solenoid we're taking out, and we're going to be using this ICP purge solenoid block off plate. You see, it's just a piece of aluminum, place for an O-ring and a bolt, and it'll just block it off. All right, so I'm working through some more wiring, and there was a ground down here that the ring terminal, the ring terminal was broken off. I don't know if that had been broken or not, but it looked like it'd been old. So I was repairing this, and it went down here behind where that new engine mount is. And as I was getting ready to reroute it, I felt down in here when I was moving the wires, and I found a wire mouse had chewed on. So I'm very thankful that I found that when I was redoing this, so it wouldn't be a problem later. So we're just going to reroute this, and it's going to go to the back of the engine with another ground that's back there. So I'm going to rework this a little bit. You can see I've started to put the accessories on. I got my new power steering pump. The new power steering pump, Justin thought I needed an adapter to go from flare fitting to an O-ring, and apparently whoever changed this out at some point, I don't know what the deal was. It's the line's over here. It's a compression fitting. It's a fitting with a compression, a stub of a line with a compression fitting on it. I'm not going to use that, so I ordered a new line. Well, the new line for this is an O-ring here and an O-ring here, so I don't need the adapter. I reworked the return line so that it'll come up and go around, because the pressure line comes out here. And I want this to be, I've reworked it twice because the first time I did it, I was really close in here, but I need that piece of rubber so as the engine moves, it's not going to be pulling on these pieces of tubing here, this pipe, and crack it. So I did it again, spread it out so I can get a little more hose in there. So I'm putting the water pump on, new AC Delco, made in China, thank you very little. And I have to deal with the steam line here. Alright, so there's apparently in this LS engine, when it sits in a vehicle and the front of the engine is tilted up, it allows air to get trapped in the top portion of the head right here. So they put this crossover tube go from one to the other. and then it's ported. So then this hose used to go to the radiator. Well, I'm not using the LS radiator from the truck. I'm using one from the C10. I ordered a new one. So I have to have a way to expel any trapped air that's in here. So what I did is I took the water pump and I got on the pump side, and I've drilled and tapped the housing and put a fitting in here with a barb on it so I could just take that hose and cut it. Now, I made 2 trips to go get fittings because the first time I went to go do this, I decided where I was going to do it, and I took the hose and looked at the end of it, and I thought, okay, well, that looks like maybe a 3/8, you know, 5/16, 3/8, something like that. And then I cut it in half to do the routing, so it's much smaller. 1/4 inch is really what you need. So don't make the mistake I did. It was too late by the time I did that, so I had to go back and get another fitting that had the same pipe thread that I already tapped with a reduced barb on it to fit this. So that should take care of it. Now we're going to change over the thermostat housing on here and the gasket. That'll be next. After that, we're going to work on heater hoses. I can't believe what heater hose costs these days. It's been a long time since I bought any. $2 a foot, $12 worth of heater hose. Man, I guess I'm just showing my age. I remember buying that stuff for 50 cents a foot. But anyways, let's get the thermostat cleaned up. It's pretty cruddy. So I'm going to clean it up before we put it on. One of the bolts broke in the old water pump, so I'm going to have to go find another bolt to match it. Well, I got it cleaned up, and I cleaned out the holes, got all the corrosion out. Couldn't get down in there real well, but in the midst of it, I destroyed the thermostat, so I'll have to get a new thermostat now. I did get my heater hoses in. I flushed the heater core because it had green coolant in it, and we're going to be running probably extended life red, I imagine is what we're after. So I went ahead and flushed that, so it's ready to go. All the water pump cooling system is done as far as I know. Yeah. Radiator, just got notification it's on back order. Alright, I got my thermostat and the housing. I'm not going to put it in yet because as I was looking at this, you know, I've got a lot of corrosion going on inside that aluminum, and I think I want to flush this engine out before I hook it up because I got a brand new radiator going in, and I don't want all that crap plugging up the radiator. So we'll flush that before we put it together. Justin had this, he brought for me the new cover. Apparently that's 99-02. I think it'll be just fine. I have to clearance it for my shift modulator line I added right here. It goes down to the transmission. I'll have to clearance that. That's not a big deal. And he brought me this fuse cover. Oh, I have to change the bracket for that cover too, because that doesn't work with the old bracket. He said this one is a little bit longer, it goes back farther. I think it's a nice look. I think it turned out, that's going to look really good, I think. What do I know? So I have to change this out, change that bracket. He brought me the fuse cover, the fuse box, but it's not the, he says there's another piece, which makes sense because there's no way that would cover the fuses. So I'm at a standstill on the wiring until I get that, because I don't want to go any farther until I mount that. Once I mount the fuse box, we'll move forward with that. I ordered the battery box and it's on back order. So we're going to be taking this one apart and making this one suit this side, so that ought to be interesting. We'll get that in the next video, but I think we're going to end it here because yeah, it's getting kind of long again. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Look for part 3 when we do the battery tray and hopefully some more wiring. Catch you on the next one.